There's a phrase liars use more than any other. I need some space. Not because it's the most creative lie, but because it works perfectly on the type of person they choose to deceive. The type who believes that when someone says they need time, it's because they're processing something difficult, that they're growing, that they'll come back different. Sandra said, "I need some space," on a Monday morning while she packed a bag I had never seen her use before. Small bag, 3 days of clothes at most. "I'm going to stay at my mom's for a few days. I need to think." "Okay," I said. And it was okay, genuinely. Just not for the reason she thought. My name is Michael Carter, 47 years old, senior civil engineer and founding partner of a structural consulting firm in Chicago. I've spent 22 years finding what doesn't hold up in other people's structures before that weakness becomes an irreversible problem. This story happened 4 years ago, before the divorce I've mentioned in previous episodes, before I learned to apply the same logic I use in structural assessments to my own personal life. It was my marriage to Sandra that taught me that the precision I apply to my clients' problems should have been applied much earlier to my own house. We got married when I was 33 and she was 30. The wedding was in Sandra's parents' backyard in Evanston. 60 people. Simple, personal, exactly what both of us wanted. I had been with the structural consulting firm for 4 years at that point, beginning to build a real client base. She was a senior project manager at a real estate development firm downtown, good at her job, organized, the type of person who commands trust the moment she walks into a room. We were both career-driven, both believed that things worth having required sustained work to build. That shared orientation was the foundation. For the first 4 years, it held. We bought the Oak Park house in year 2, a Victorian that needed structural work I was qualified to assess and coordinate. We worked on it together for 8 months on weekends. Sandra refinished the floors herself. I replaced 3 load-bearing walls with the help of 2 colleagues from the firm. The house became ours in the most literal sense. We traveled once a year, always planned well in advance. When the firm grew and demanded more of my time, Sandra was the first to encourage reinvestment over lifestyle expansion. When she wanted to take an executive leadership course at Kellogg, I covered it before she finished asking. We built well. Together. What I didn't account for was what comfort and time do to some people. In the 5th year, something changed. It started with the evenings. Sandra had always been home by 7. Suddenly she was arriving at 9, 10. Always with an explanation, a meeting that ran over, an urgent client, a deadline that couldn't wait. Then the phone. She had always been careless with her phone, leaving it anywhere, never bothered by who might see it. Suddenly she carried it everywhere, into the bathroom, silenced before setting her bag down in the hallway. Then the small irritations. Comments about things that had never bothered her before, a shift in temperature in conversations that used to feel easy. Each change in isolation had an explanation. Together they formed a pattern. But I kept looking at the parts, not the pattern. What made me start looking at the pattern was something small. A Tuesday afternoon. I came home earlier than usual. A meeting had been moved. Came in through the front door. Sandra was in the kitchen with her back to me, talking on the phone in a low voice. I didn't catch all of it, but I caught enough. "I know it's complicated, but I can't keep going like this either. The weekend after next, Michael's going to be home the whole time, maybe the week after." I stopped in the hallway. Michael's going to be home the whole time. Not that I have plans, not that the situation is complicated. Michael is going to be home. As a logistical obstacle, as the factor that needed to be worked around so that what she actually wanted could happen. I kept walking toward the kitchen as if I hadn't heard anything. "Hey, I'm home early." Meeting got moved. She turned. A fraction of a second of something on her face that most people would have missed. A micro-expression. Someone recalibrating in real time. "That's nice. Should we cook tonight?" "Sure," I said. I slept fine that night, because I had made a decision. I wasn't going to react without proof, wasn't going to confront without evidence, wasn't going to give Sandra the opportunity to build a narrative before I had the material to dismantle any narrative she tried to construct. The next morning, Saturday, Sandra went to her yoga class. I went to my home office. I opened the joint credit card statement. 40 minutes later, I had the first picture. 4 months of charges that didn't correspond to the life I knew. Restaurants in neighborhoods she had never mentioned having commitments. A charge at a boutique hotel in Lincoln Park on a date she had told me she was at a work conference in Milwaukee. Another charge at the same hotel 3 weeks later. There was more. In the household Gmail account we shared for domestic communications, I found hotel booking confirmations in her name. 2 I had never seen because there had been no reason to look. And there was also because I began searching with the meticulousness I apply to structural failure analysis. A registration confirmation for an encrypted messaging app she had created using a secondary email address I didn't know existed. An app whose only purpose is to ensure messages cannot be recovered. I closed the laptop, poured a glass of water, stood at the kitchen window looking at the yard for 10 minutes, then went back to the laptop and called a private investigator I'd worked with 2 years earlier on a corporate fraud case for a client. The work took 10 days. During those 10 days, Sandra didn't know anything had changed. I had dinner with her 4 times. The first time, Wednesday, she came home at 9 with the explanation that a developer client had insisted on extending their meeting over dinner. I listened carefully, asked about the client. She gave enough detail to make the story plausible without the excess of detail that would make it false. She was good at this, or I had trained her to be by never questioning her before. The Friday we went to dinner together at a restaurant she chose. She was present, engaged, talking about work, about plans for the holidays. I watched her phone vibrate twice during dinner, each time she turned it face down without looking at it. After the second time, she put it in her purse. On Sunday, we went to her brother's house for his son's birthday. 3 hours with her family. Her mother asked how work was going. Her brother talked about his home renovation. Sandra was warm, normal, the wife I had always known. It was the longest afternoon of those 10 days. Inside, waiting. On the 10th day, Sandra told me she needed space. Small bag, mom's house, needs to think. Okay. 20 minutes later, the investigator texted, "I have everything. When can we meet?" Today. During those 10 days, I lived 2 lives simultaneously. The visible one, the husband who didn't know anything, present at dinners, engaged in conversations, participating in plans for a future that was already dismantling itself. The one underneath, waiting, watching the clock, checking my phone for the investigator's updates when Sandra wasn't in the room. On Thursday evening of that first week, Sandra suggested we have friends over for dinner that Saturday. I said yes. We spent Friday evening preparing food together, the same kitchen routines we'd had for years, her chopping vegetables while I handled the proteins, the comfortable choreography of 2 people who've shared space for a long time. I thought about that a lot in the days after. How ordinary it all looked from the outside, how completely invisible the thing that was about to end everything appeared to anyone who wasn't looking for it. The friends came on Saturday. 4 couples. 8 people sitting around the table we'd bought together at a furniture market in Pilsen. Sandra was the best host she ever was, funny and warm and fully present in a way she hadn't been in weeks when it was just the 2 of us. I watched her across the table all evening. Not with anger, with the particular clarity of someone who finally understands what they're looking at. The report was 15 pages, time-stamped photos, location records cross-referenced against the days Sandra had given me explanations that didn't hold up. The man's name was David Walsh, 41 years old, a project director at the same real estate development firm where Sandra worked. 6 documented meetings in the past 45 days, 3 at restaurants, 2 at hotels, 1 at an apartment the investigator identified as leased to David. David Walsh was married, 3 kids. I saved the report in an encrypted folder with backups in 3 separate locations. Called Patricia Chen, the family law attorney I had consulted a week earlier when I was still in the preparation phase. "Patricia, I have the complete material. We can proceed. Can you come in tomorrow at 8? I'll be there at 7:50. Before I continue, I need to stop here, because this story is about more than an infidelity. It's about preparation. It's about the difference between arriving at a personal and financial crisis with everything documented, or arriving with nothing and losing what took you decades to build. And I need to ask you something directly. Are you prepared? Not for infidelity. For any situation where what you've built could be challenged. A divorce, a probate dispute, an inheritance contest, a legal process someone else initiated that arrives at your door without warning. Most people aren't prepared. Most people work their whole lives, accumulate a home, savings, retirement, equity in a business, and have no organized documentation, no legal protection structure, no knowledge of how to shield what's theirs. And when the crisis comes, and it comes for 1 in 3 families, everything is left in the hands of a legal process that divides without asking who built what. I've seen this destroy people in 6 months who spent 40 years building. Financial planning for retirees was created to prevent that from happening to you. It's not theory. It's a practical guide for how to document your assets today, how to structure legally what's yours, how to arrive at any difficult situation with your wealth protected. And right now I have a condition that I won't repeat. The first 5 people who access through the link in the first pinned comment will pay less than 1 hour with a family law attorney. Less than 1 afternoon of confusion trying to figure out what's yours and what isn't. 5 people. Then it closes. The link is in the first pinned comment. Open it now before continuing to watch. The 5 spots don't wait. Back to Michael. My meeting with Patricia lasted 90 minutes. She reviewed the report, the credit card statements, the hotel booking confirmations. Michael, you have solid evidence. The investigator's report is admissible. The credit card statements are from the joint account. The email confirmations were found in the shared household Gmail account. What do I protect? The Oak Park house you purchased before the marriage remains yours without question. The assets acquired during the marriage are subject to equitable distribution, but with proof of adultery and your documented financial contribution, we argue for a proportion favorable to you. Timeline for notification? 2 days to organize the complete package. Where do you want her served? I thought for a moment. Sandra was at her mom's house, processing space that was really covered to keep seeing David without the logistical inconvenience of me being home. At her office, during business hours. Understood. Wednesday at noon, notification was delivered at the reception desk of the real estate firm where Sandra worked. At 12:18, my phone started vibrating. Sandra called 7 times in 20 minutes. I didn't answer any of them. The texts started at 12:30. Michael, what is this? They served me at the office. Please pick up. I can explain. Please. Michael. At 1 in the afternoon, a different message. Can I come to the house tonight to talk? I responded to that one. The locks have been changed. Your belongings will be packed and delivered to the address you give your attorney. All communication from here forward goes through Patricia Chen. I sent Patricia's number. Didn't respond to anything else. That evening, Sandra came to the house at 6:30. I watched on the security camera I'd installed the previous week. She stood on the front step for about 15 minutes, tried the key 3 times, hit the doorbell twice, then walked back to her car and sat there for what the camera recorded as 19 minutes before she drove away. I didn't try to imagine what she was feeling. Not because I didn't care about her suffering as a person, but because her suffering at that moment was a consequence of decisions she had made across months. Generating empathy for the consequence before processing the cause is a specific form of self-sabotage that I had learned to recognize and avoid. I went to sleep at 11, woke at 6 and went to work. The process took 5 months. Sandra's attorney tried 4 approaches. That the adultery had been a consequence of a marriage already in collapse, not the cause of the collapse. Patricia presented 5 years of financial records showing my equal or greater contribution to all joint expenses, contradicting the narrative of a neglected marriage. That the investigator's report had violated her privacy. Patricia presented the case law establishing admissibility of evidence obtained in public spaces through non-invasive methods. That the email confirmations had been accessed irregularly. Patricia presented the shared access history of the household Gmail account, documented in Google's own records, showing mutual access over years. That the distribution should be 50-50 regardless of conduct. Patricia presented documentation of the Oak Park house purchase, with resources provably predating the marriage, removing it from distribution. The judgment was favorable on the points that mattered. House, entirely mine. Assets acquired during the marriage, 63% to me. Legal fees, charged to Sandra. Sandra sent me a message 2 days after the judgment. One line. I hope you find happiness. I read it, replied, thank you. Not because it was a goodbye I needed to give, but because it was the honest response. There was no anger, there was clarity. She had made choices. I had responded to those choices with the precision my training allows me to have. The outcome was what it was. A few months later, I learned through a mutual contact that David Walsh's wife had filed for divorce the same week Sandra's process became public record. His firm had reassigned him to a different team following an internal review. I didn't feel satisfaction at that. My objective was never for her to suffer beyond what the natural consequences of her choices would bring. My objective was always singular, not to be the only person who paid the cost of decisions that weren't mine. That objective was met. This story is not about revenge. It's about preparation. It's about the difference between being the person who discovers something and reacts emotionally, and being the person who discovers something, breathes, documents, and acts at the right time in the right way. It's not easy, especially when you still care about the person. But it's possible. And it's the only path that preserves not just the assets, but the dignity. The next story on this channel will also be mine. Michael Carter, still here, still finding what doesn't hold up. Before I close, one last thing. I know you watched this story to the end because something in it resonates. Maybe it isn't infidelity. Maybe it's the quiet fear of not knowing what you'd be left with if everything changed tomorrow. That fear is real. And it exists because most people never received the financial education they needed. Nobody showed you how to document your assets in a way that's uncontestable. Nobody explained how to legally structure what's yours before a crisis arrives. Nobody told you that financial protection isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, and that the window to act before the problem appears is always smaller than you think. Financial planning for retirees closes that gap. Designed for people over 45 with a home, savings, retirement accounts, anything representing years of accumulated work, who want to arrive at any difficult situation with what's theirs protected, documented, shielded. And today, I have a condition that doesn't exist anywhere else. The first 5 people who access now through the first pinned comment link will have the lowest price this material has ever been offered at. No comparison. 5. Not 10. Not 20. 5 people who will act now while everyone else keeps thinking they have time. They don't. The right time to protect yourself is always before you need protection. The link is in the first pinned comment right now. Click. Before the 5 spots close. Before you leave this video and life keeps giving you the feeling that there will be time later. There won't. You spent decades building. 2 minutes now protects all of it. Take care. See you in the next one.